How's it going, YouTube? Coming to you today with another video, and today, guys, the video is going to be the last Where to Handtrap before the NAWCQ. I want to keep you up to date as possible. I've been working so much this week and cramming that I haven't really had time to do this final one, but I'm going to make this one real quick. It's going to be a quicker video because I want to make sure that I run through some of the more important things that you want to look out for this weekend. If you haven't already, check out my sponsors on RW, Cloud, Gem, Arla, Imperium, Dragonshield, or Grimoire. Definitely go ahead and do so all down below in the description. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Thank you all so very much for the support lately. I can't even comprehend how many subscribers I've been gaining, and I just love you all so much. Thank you all so much for the support. I just I can't say anything else but just thank you. It's been so appreciated. But we have a lot to talk about today too, so let's go ahead and jump right in on Lunalight. This is a deck that's going to be very popular. You need an out to Liger Dancer. You need to find something that's going to be reliable for you. The huge choke point here is going to be Gold Leo. People are siding Veilers just for this matchup so they have extra targeting. If you go ahead and negate the Gold Leo, it can just be wraps. Same thing if you droll this deck. If they go like Tenki at Fractal and you droll, it's crazy bad for them. That's one thing where they're going to go Fractal, dump Silverhound, Hound Summon, and then it's just not going to be super optimal. They have like certain lines that they can play through or things that they can do, but it's not going to be the most optimal. And you want to be able to stop Baguska this format too. That's another thing that's going to be a big card that you're going to see. But otherwise, you want to make sure that you are lancing this deck so they can't Miracle Fusion. Stopping the Wolf and the Masquerade is important. Same with DD Crown Martin, because they're going to go chick dump Martin and then try to bring back Martin and detach it so they can search the Masquerade. But if you DD Crow the Martin immediately, then they just don't have it. It's a one of, and they can't get to Masquerade so easily, which is really good for you. Ashing the Hound is really solid too, because again, that's just going to be another way for them to start. And then you can also go ahead and Ogre or Bell the Wolf or the Masquerade to cut off the Miracle Fusions as well, just so they don't have that access either. Mitsu Orcust, the one thing that really did change in this deck is that Ash, Veiler, Imperm, if they start with Orcust cards, should really be going directly to just King of the Feral Imps, because if they're starting with Orcust and they want to get to MitsuRyzeal, they're going to overlay Harpor and Gearsu to go into King, and then King is going to try to get to Habakiri, and if you cut that off, it's really rough for your opponent to keep playing outside of Orcust cards. So that's one thing where you do want to shut off the King of the Feral Imp as much as possible. DD Crow onto the Skeleton target or Bell the Skeleton effect, especially if they're on your turn trying to summon out a Dingirsu. That's why I like Cosmic Cyclone, but it's not big enough of a deck to just run Cosmic, Ash onto Harpor or Saji. It depends on which one they start here, but it's going to be one of the two. Moving on to Memento. This deck is something that is still in the room. Mialis is really good against this deck, but the other two are not very good. DD Crow and Gaddock is going to be really important, or Bell onto the Fusion, because that's a huge choke point. Not being able to get into your Creation King. But the other thing too is Creation King being Ash is huge, because this is something where your opponent can't triple dump, and they can't get to things like their combined creation, which is going to be really important. Usually that's one of the last things they send, and that's going to be huge for them to not have. Ogre on a field spell, or just go ahead and negate the horse, right? That's going to be a really solid spot as always, because again, that's something that once it's popped, they turn on the full effect of things like Fusion, and you don't really want to have that happen. Melodious is a deck that you won't really see, but you could. Ash or Bell onto Ostinato, because it's going to be the scariest card. If you see your opponent just summon Refrain, you just want to go ahead and use Veiler Imperm onto Refrain. But usually if you see your opponent just going straight into Baka, you want to go ahead and just negate that. Just make sure that it's stopped as soon as possible. But the huge thing here too is the fact that you can go ahead and negate Bacha. I know a lot of people don't know that, but it's something that you can do. If my opponent uses something like First Movement solo and I have Ash and Veiler in my hand, or Ash and Imperm, I'm letting that resolve and just using Imperm onto the Refrain at that point, right? That's something where you can hold the Ash for later, and even Ash like the Link too, because it summons to the Eras. That's why you can Ogre this card, and it's really powerful because I can't summon anymore if there's no monster to summon to. You can also go ahead and Ogre the Couplet, which is really solid, to stop access to the Fusion spell. Now, MitsuRyzeal, this deck is going to be really popular in the room, but I feel like it's going to be like MitRy Onomat. So that's going to be something too that we're going to see a lot of. Holding Bell for your turn is going to be really important, just because you want to make sure your opponent can't bring back the Mirakumo and then nuke your board, right? So that's something too where if my opponent goes ahead and uses something like Prayer to attribute a monster to bring back, I'm just going to go ahead and DD Crow whatever is tributed for cost, because at that point it doesn't get to use its effect because it's in a new location. The other thing too is I think Blue Eyes is going to be somewhere in Top Cut. This is definitely still going to be a deck that's going to be played. Ashing Wishes is huge. This is something that you really want to do against the deck. The next thing is going to be using Valor Imperm onto Barrel. I just want to stop this card as soon as possible. I do not want my opponent to get into load. I don't want my opponent getting to Drill Beam. I don't want them having this like resource loop, which is crazy to do. And then you also stop your opponent from just going ahead and dumping a Blue Eyes off of this, which makes Fua even better. So if you have like Valor Imperm and Fua, like one of each, then at that point, you're just going to go ahead and stop the barrel after you have a Fua in play. And it's like, are you going to link one or are you going to pass? Because either you want the Blue Eyes Engrave off the field spell, otherwise you're just going to pass with a barrel or something like super mid, right? So that's something that you definitely want to consider. I think stopping barrel is like 110% my favorite stop in this deck besides Ash for Wishes or Bell for Roar. Crystron, there isn't a whole lot to say about this deck because I've already covered this a few times, but Ash on Tristalos is really good. If you have a different hand trap and you want to interact, this is the way to do it. Usually it's like Nibiru Ash because your opponent will chain Tristalos and you chain Ash, and then their board just gets cleaned up, right? So something that you can really do that's really powerful. That and Ashing on Imseti is really strong too, because that card just nets so much advantage for the deck. And then also having things like the King's Hark to go ahead and keep pitching cards out of your hand is really strong. Bestial Regenesis is going to be the most common variant of this deck. It's not a very good deck, but it's something that people do run. You can definitely go ahead and DD Crow the Lubellian so your opponent can't get to regain, which can be a huge issue if you're on decks like Maliss. Belling the Birth is really strong because you don't want your opponent to be able to get back to everything. Also, Ashing Code is more important than Ashing Archfiend if they start with Code. Whichever one they start with, you want to go ahead and Ash. But if they start Code, I'm always Ashing that. Because usually it's better to go ahead and just Ash whatever is brought out, because at that point they can't punish you with a different copy. But in this deck, it's way better to keep your opponent off 2,500 bodies. And then just go ahead and Valor Imperm the Regenesis Lord, because this is going to cut off access to the Birth. White Forest is very similar to even like Artmage. I think they're both just not very super real decks. They're something that you can just kind of droll and move on about your day. You can Valor or Imperm the Sylvie, versus like even Ashing and LZ, and both of them are really solid choke points here, because if your opponent are starting with these, they're really going to need them to resolve. Bell and Awana is pretty good, but I really do like Bell and Vengeance, or go ahead and Crow Vengeance when it tries to come back to the board. This is a card that's very scary. This is a card that can put up a lot of pressure on the board, and it can be almost a whole end board by itself. So that's something that you want to go ahead and get rid of as soon as possible. And then Ogre onto Deception, make your opponent lose card advantage. The blind second variant of Gem Knight is the most common right now, and honestly, the most important thing about this matchup is going ahead and using DD Crow or Bell onto Nephrom, and if they summon Nephrom, just go ahead and Valor Imperm it. You do not want that card to resolve. It's a lot of free advantage and a lot of cards that they're going to be getting to. You also can Ash the Dispersion. I really like Ashing the Absorb Fusion. If they're going second, they're going to be on Absorb Fusion and Scatter Fusion, so these are things you want to watch out for. But even if I see Dispersion right away, this is a card that definitely needs to get stopped as soon as possible, but Absorb Fusion is also very good. You can also Valor Imperm onto Phantom Quartz, because not only is it a search, but it's also a fusion, which is a lot of free advantage. Punk, you either want to stop the Deer Note resummon, or you want to just Ash the Carp, Valor Imperm the Carp, or just go ahead and Ogre the Jam Session. The deck itself is not super intense, but it's something where you have to know your choke points in this matchup, otherwise it can get very hard to play against. But if you stop them early with like an Ogre on Session, or you Ash a Carp or Valor Imperm the Carp, I feel like you're going to be in a very good position moving forward. As Continue keeps getting cut from the deck, this is now just going to be the Rock of the Vanquisher add back target. You want to just get rid of it, because you'll start draining your opponent on resources that are the different attributes they need in their hand, and I feel like that's going to be the most important. Using your Ash Valor Imperm onto Rosin is really solid, but if you're going first and your opponent summons Holy Sue and they try to use the effect, I'm Ashing that all day long, because I want to clear the body. At that point, you're really just getting card advantage, because if your opponent's trying to summon from deck, then you know the Fire and Dark that they have in hand, so you already have that card knowledge. You know the Holy Sue is going to be gone if you clear it. So you have a really good idea of what you need to do in your end board to be able to win against this matchup, because they already give you so much advantage. I know some people are playing like Eye of Truth inside, which is kind of funny, but I don't think this is the event that you really want to like over prepare for VS, because I don't think that it's going to be like that crazy. But the only thing that's going to be really annoying about this deck is the burn damage from Borger. You can definitely go ahead and just Imperm Rock of the Vanquisher in your draw phase, and that's one less thing that you have to worry about, which I really like to do, because I think that's a really solid choke point here. Or just Ogre the Field Spell, because that can be a problem. They can also get the things like Snow Devil and to a different attribute. Ogre is like pretty okay this format. It's not the best by any means, but it has its moments where it's like pretty decent. The only thing that you really have to know about Mermail, besides using things like Droll in this matchup, is that you really want to go ahead and use Valor Imperm onto Prima Donna, because this is going to the matchup where they just try to lock you out with the barrier statue. You can also, if you have nothing else on your side that really makes sense, put in Lancia so they can't minstrel you. That's really important because you're trying to banish something out of your hand, so then they can't even activate it and they can't pitch something else out of their hand that's going to net them even more value. So Lancia against this deck as a blanket card, or Droll, or just Valor Imperm on Prima Donna is going to be extremely important for you. I also really like Ash on the Abyss Shrine just because it gets them to things like Coelacanth, and that's really annoying to deal with too. By all means, Evil Twin is going to be a deck that you probably will see at this event. It's not going to be super popular, but I do think that it's going to be something that we will see. This is a deck that you want to hold Imperm for Caesar on your own turn. You can go ahead and Bell the Trouble Sunny, you can Ogre the Desiree, Ash the Requiem, or just DD Crow things like Engraver. They usually only play 1/1 of the 2 Evil Twin Link 2s. So this is something where you can get rid of them early and just not have to deal with them. Sometimes they play a second one of the pink one, but it's not always super common because the extra deck is pretty tight. But these are the most common interactions for this deck that I think are going to be the most important for you during this matchup. Definitely go ahead and Bell the effect of Eclipse Twin trying to bring back Ouroboros, or just DD Crow the Ouroboros when they try to use the Eclipse Twin effect. This deck is just strictly trying to hand loop you, then Protoss you. So if you see Protoss at the board, it's usually time to drop Rock. Definitely go ahead and Ash Valor Imperm onto Stodwhale. Being able to get to Heraldic Arts and summon out multiple XCs is going to be really problematic. They get both of those and they can banish the Stodwhale to go ahead and summon out another rank 4, which is crazy. And then Ogre on Duodrive, just so you can stop the cross. But at that point, you're probably already getting hand loop for quite a lot. So this is a deck that you definitely want to Charm Me. Definitely throw any Charmy that you have for the most part, but Meowth is definitely going to be the worst one here. But Perulia or Fulos is going to be really solid. The number one thing that I would say here as a recommendation is just belling the effect of Binder on Summon when they try to banish cards from the grave, instead of belling things like GWC, because of the fact that if your opponent has a Hair or they have a Bestial in hand, then you just get punished for using the bell too early. I'd rather just do it on the effect so that your opponent can't really punish you further past that. Phantasme is a really popular option right now, which I think is really good against this deck. It's something that will net you a lot of cards. And then if my opponent leads Chesty Cat, I'm probably just stopping that at all means necessary. Usually it's whatever the first name is, it will get Valor or Impermed. But you can definitely start ogering the Link 2s as well, just so they can't Link climb. If you enjoyed this video, definitely let me know down below in the comment section. I will catch you all in the next video. I'm on my way to the NAWCQ, and I'll see you all there.